nice. So this is about things that you probably haven't used Photoshop for, but things you can do with Photoshop. Quite useful things sometimes. Sometimes. Now the first thing is called Vanishing Point. And Vanishing Point allows you to work with a perspective grid. So if you've got a photo of a wall that's got graffiti on it, and you want to get rid of the graffiti, Vanishing Point will allow you to do that. Or if you've got a pincushion sitting on a deck, and you want to get rid of it, and maybe the splodges of blue paint near it as well, Vanishing Point will allow you to do that too. And the way that you use it is you open the image that you want to adjust, and then you go Filter, Vanishing Point. And that opens up this, some features in Photoshop have a sort of a separate interface. Camera Raw has one, Vanishing Point has one, there's one or two. And we do the Vanishing Point work in this window and then OK it and it goes back into Photoshop. So, do you guys want chairs? Yeah? There's a few dotted around. Some over there. I don't want you passing out in the middle of my talk, Mike. Yeah. Okay, so in Vanishing Point you define a grid and you use the image to help you do that. So over here, for example, I can just about see that I've got a line here that's the division between two planks. It's pretty hard to see. So I'm going to click on it there. And that puts down a marker point. I'm going to put down another marker point here. And another one here. And I'm following the grid right the way through. And you can zoom out using Command minus, Command plus, any of the usual tools. And this one I'm going to line up with that grid again as far as I can, like so. Now if you get that filled with a blue cross-hatching, you've got what's called a happy grid. If it's yellow or red, you have an unhappy grid, and it's not going to work. So you've got to have a blue grid appear in that area. You can adjust it. Whenever you come into this window, the first tool that you've got loaded automatically allows you to define the grid. But this tool here allows me to edit it. So I could grab one of those pointers now and move it, and you can see there's a yellow, that's a red grid, that's not happy, and yellow, that's not happy either. It's got to be blue, but you can see you've got quite a lot of leeway with a blue grid. So there's my grid. Now I'm going to switch to what looks like the clone stamp tool. And it is the clone stamp tool unless I turn on the healing aspect. This is a combination of the two. If I've got the heal aspect on, then rather than just making an exact copy of the area that I define as the source point, it'll make a copy of it, and then when I let go, it'll try and merge the result into the background. So if I say, okay, this is about where I want the source point, and you define the source point in the same way that you would in Photoshop, you Alt-click to define where you want to pick it up from, and you can see now I've got a little bit of brush there loaded. I'm going to go up here and increase the diameter of the brush to 150. Now it's a bit bigger, so you can do that on the fly as well. And that lines up with the divisions between the planks. So I'm going to line that up again with the divisions between the planks right here. And then click and drag. And the green cross below and to the right is the source point, and it's following me around, and it's painting in that area. When I let go, it merges it. So that's the benefit of using this heal attribute with the clone stamp tool. So that's one of the kinds of things that you can do with Vanishing Point. It's not the most exciting thing you can do. It's certainly not the most exciting image. So I'm just going to go back out of that, and I'll show you another thing that you can do. And this is, you can take a 3D box and wrap the cover onto it in Photoshop. So if I open up this image, there's my 3D box. Now this was created in Illustrator There's the original. It looks identical. It is, except for this feature here in the layers window. That area indicates this is what's called a smart object. And a smart object, you can scale it, do things to it, without actually destroying any of the original data. You can always sort of come back to that point. I'll show you how I created this, because you might find it useful. In Illustrator, I'll just create a new file, a new document. Of course, they don't call it document in Illustrator. It's called an artboard, because you don't have pages, you have artboards in Illustrator. It's a legacy problem that they've been dealing with for years, and they've got over it with InDesign, but they haven't yet got over it with Illustrator. So this is an artboard, and I'm just going to choose no. The X and the Y, which is where it is on the document, on the artboard, where that point of it is on the artboard, but it also gives me width and height. Now, the cover that I want to put on this is 10 centimeters wide and 15 tall. That's the front cover. And the sides of the box are 5 centimeters wide. So the bottom is 5 by 10 and the side is 5 by 15. So this, because it's just the flat cover looking at us, I'm going to make that one 100 millimeters wide and 150 millimeters tall. Now I'm done with the transform window. So that's 10 by 15 centimeters. But I want 3D. Effect, 3D, Extrude and Bevel. You can do a lot of fun stuff in Illustrator. Any of you use 3D in Illustrator? Yeah? You tried the 3D Revolve? Isn't that fun? It doesn't have very many practical applications, but it sure is fun. I'm going to click on Preview, and now I can rotate that box without perspective, so it looks really strange. It looks as if it's tapering towards the front. In fact, the front is exactly the same dimension as the back, but it just looks wrong to us. But if I help the perspective along a little bit, now it's okay. Now I'm going to extrude it a little. The extrude depth right now is given as 50 points. And I don't know what 5 centimeters, the depth of my box, is in terms of points. Fortunately, I don't need to. I can just highlight that and type in 50 millimeters. OK. And there's a box that is essentially 10 by 15 by 5. And I can save that here and then go into Photoshop, and instead of using File Open to open the image, I can use File Place. If I opened it, because it's vector, and Photoshop doesn't do vector when you go File Open, the first thing it would ask me is, what resolution do you want this thing to be? And my vector information is gone. But if I choose File Place, it allows it to bring it in as vector. And if I wanted to edit it, I could double-click on that and go straight back out, and I'll show you. I've got this vector file here. That's Box AI. That's the original file that created this. And essentially, there it is, and it's still linked. If I double-click on this, it goes into Illustrator and opens it straight up. So you can always return to the source when you have a smart object. So it's not only non-destructive working on it in Photoshop, it's something you can update and edit. If I decided that on this one, I wanted to change its fill color to green, and then I saved it, and then I go back into Photoshop, it's green now. So it's a two-way thing. That's the real benefit of smart objects. However, you can't do the kind of operation I'm going to do on a smart object. So in this case, I've copied the layer. I have stopped that from being a smart object. Now it's a little strange. In Photoshop, you can choose a layer, click on the Options button and say Convert to Smart Object. If you want to take a smart object and convert it back into being an ordinary object, there's no equivalent entry on the Options button. Instead, you can just click on the layer beneath, make a new layer which arrives directly above it, choose your smart object layer, Command E merges it down. Now it's not a smart object. So that's how you stop an object being smart. Anyway, we don't actually want that one. We're going to use this one. So now I need the cover. Now some of you who were here this morning, which of you were in this morning's session? One? Oh, okay, just a few, okay. I may have mentioned, I've mentioned then, I've got a small holding in Wales. We have 11 sheep and chickens and dogs and vegetables. And I kind of miss them all when I'm down here. So I usually try and involve sheep or chickens or dogs in. Okay, so now is that moment, and this is the cover that I'm going to put on. And these are some of my sheep. This is when Spot decided to invade and came in the back door. We found a chicken on the couch once facing the TV. TV wasn't on, it's just an optimistic chicken. You know. So this is the cover. Now that is transparent. It's a PSD file, which means normally it's a multi-layer file. But PSDs also support transparency in any layer. I've converted what was the background layer into an ordinary layer, and that's maintained the transparency that I've assigned. Then I can save the file, open it. That is still transparent. So I've got the top, the side, and the bottom of the box. Now, in order to have that available to me when I do this vanishing point exercise, I have to have that copied into memory first. I can't come back out and get it and go back in. It doesn't work. So Command A selects the entire layer. Command C copies it into memory. If you really want to be sure, you go Edit, Copy, and you know you've got it, because there's nothing worse than doing a lot of work in Vanishing Point and then finding I didn't bring the image. And I'll go Filter, wrong layer mark, Filter, Vanishing Point. There's the interface, and I'm going to click to define the 4 corners of the lid of the box. And it looks as I've done it reasonably accurately, but you have to check. So I'm going to zoom in here using Control Plus and Spacebar, and that's not quite as accurate as I thought. That one's pretty good. If you don't do this accurately, that one's not so good. You won't get a good result. You might get a usable result, but it won't be great. And Command 0 takes me back out. Now I need to extrude this so that I've got the sides and the base. And if I hold down the Command key and I drag on the middle handle, I get another plane coming off the original at 90 degrees. And if I now do that to the end, I got another plane coming off at 90 degrees. Now if I held down the Alt key, I can swing that like it's the door on hinges. So it's possible to arrange for the extrusion to be at an angle other than 90 degrees. But 90 degrees is the default. If that's what you want, you've got it. You don't have to worry about it. So now I've got all of my planes there. Now I need the image. Command V. There it is. And I've now got to drag this onto the grid. Now I've found through many tedious operations that you've got to grab this in the right place. If I grab it down here, because that's inside the grid area, it'll allow me to move it, but when the whole thing sort of comes into position, it flips bits of it. And I'll have maybe a mirror image of part of the lid down here on the base of the box. So the best way is you grab it up near the top left-hand corner and you drag, and as soon as my cursor crosses the line onto the box, it flips, and then you position the corner that you can see, the only corner that you really need to worry about for now, the top left corner. Box doesn't fit, no problem. That's why we've got free transform. Command T, and there's a handle there, which I can pull down. Sometimes you can't do all this in one operation. There's a handle there. This one might need to go in 2 or even 3. There you go. So the cover wrapped around a 3D object, but the whole thing's 2-dimensional, which I think is kind of cute. So that's one use of free transform. So that's Vanishing Point. Next we have Difficult Cutouts. Now this one's great. This is just utterly amazing. Here we've got a picture of this woman on one layer, and on the layer behind we've got a sunset. And of course the task here is to cut her out of the foreground layer and put her convincingly on that background. And that's not easy. You know, that's not an easy selection, is it? There's not a single selection tool that you could use that would do that for you. There's all these little bits of, you know, bits of background showing through the hair. It's not even a hugely high-res image, which makes it even more difficult. So, if those of you who saw calculations that I did next door earlier on, the higher resolution the image, the better calculations works. But if you've got a fuzzy image, you want to use this method. So if you don't have an absolutely crisp, sharp, you know, image, this is the one to use. And the first thing that I'm going to do is make a rough selection of her. And I'm going to use the quick selection tool to do it. I don't know if you've used the quick selection tool. It took me a long time to figure out how it was good. For a long time I didn't really like it very much and didn't use it very much. But I've come to quite enjoy it. So if I start over here, of course it's easier to select the background than it is to select her. And that's immediately gone snap, and it's picked up this whole area. Now I'm going to add to that with the Shift key, click and drag. Now I've got this whole area behind her. And of course you continue to add to a selection by holding Shift down. So now I've got that area too, and that area, and that area, and that area. But I don't want the background selected, I want her. So I'm going to inverse that selection. Select, inverse. Now I've got a selection of her, not the background. At this point, you go into the Refine Edge window. Now this was in CS4, although to get to it you had to go Select, Refine Edge. In CS5, I think they're so proud of what they've done to it, they've actually put it there on the options bar. Anytime you've got a selection, it'll be there. You don't have to go hunting for it. So here I am, you know. So Refine Edge, there it is. And first of all, you can choose to view your image in a variety of different ways. So up here we've got View, and you can choose white on black, on a black background, an overlay, which is like a mask, or on layers. Now that's useful because that's pointing towards the end result that we want. I'm not going to OK Refine Edge because I'm not done yet. Now I've got to try and refine the edge. That's what this window is all about. So this selection line that I've created is capable of hanging onto a radius, an area either side of it, which follows it along. And that's the area, that radius is the area that I'm actually going to do the work in. Now, I'm just going to guess at a number for the radius. I'm going to guess 60. So in this slider here, I'm going to put in 60. So that's the radius I'm using. You could see things improved a lot already. If I just turn that back off again and turn it on, you can see it's pretty good. Then I've got these two tools, and these allow me basically to refine the radius or erase those refinements. It's kind of like adding to and subtracting from. And there's the add to, there's the brush. You can change the brush size in the same way that you can change any other brush size, the bracket keys to the right of the letter P, or you can do it up here, but that's a bit slow. And then you just click and drag and make sure you're making all those little twiddly tails of hair visible when you do this. And make sure you go over any areas within the image as well. So there we go, that's that side. And now we'll do this side again. You only need to do once on either side. Now I'm going to switch to a smaller brush and work in these areas. And again here. That's pretty good. Ooh. Problem. That's becoming selected, so I'm going to use the Erase Refinements tool. How about that? And do it over here as well. If one tool doesn't work, essentially you just got to go and get the other one. Now there are some bits of this that I'm not totally happy with. This thumbnail should be white, and it's gone, well, it's orange. And actually what I'm being able to do here is see through to the layer behind it. So if I click and drag over that thumbnail, now I've got a white thumbnail again. And this strap here has gone orange, so if I click and drag over that, now that's gone white, but the little bit above it's gone again, so you can gradually just sort of work your way, point your way to what you want to get in the end. Now that's already pretty good, but obviously we've still got a bit of discoloration here and there. It's not yet what I'd call a great piece of work. Back to the Refine Edge window, decontaminate colors. Slide the slider all the way to the right. How about that? And that is the magic of this particular window. There used to be a filter called Extract in Photoshop, which I loved because it allowed me to try and do stuff like this. Sometimes I'd have to do it a bit at a time and put those bits together and get my result. And they took out the Extract filter in CS4. It was still on the disks, but in CS5 it's gone. And on a Mac they didn't even put it on the disks. If you've got a PC, you can still lift it out of CS4 in the filters folder and put it into CS5 and it'll be there and it'll work. But this is better. They've finally come up with a tool that's better. You have to then decide how you want this to be available to you, and if you choose a new layer with a layer mask, because there aren't that many options here, and click OK, now we've got her on a background. So that's Refine Edge window. That's the new CS5 method of cutting out difficult objects, and it's incredible. It's really, really good. So I really recommend this one to you. Okay, onwards and upwards. I've got another one there. If we have time, I'll come back and do that. And that one features yet another member of the family. That's Charlie. He's a smart object without even being a smart object. And look at that tail. You can lift him out of that image with that tail intact. That's remarkable. So if I've got time, I'll come back and do that. So next we've got red faces. Right, so I'll do this in stages. You're probably all familiar with how you can change the color of an object using the Hue and Saturation window. Everything in the image will slide along that rainbow as you drag the hue slider, so you can end up with a yellow car, green car, whatever car you want, just by working with this slider in Hue and Saturation. So if you've got a photo shoot and one of the people in the shot has got a really red face, you're in trouble. Because if you use it, they're going to be really embarrassed and they're never going to want to use you again. And if this is the board of directors of your biggest freelance client or something like that, you've really got a problem. And that happened to me. I had to take a shot of the board of directors of my biggest freelance client, and there's like 200 of them. And they were coming in from all over the place and meeting at a hotel. And one person was late. And everyone else was propping up the bar. And they were hungry. This person was hours late. And by the time that person arrived, they were all really impatient, and half of them were drunk. And I had 10 seconds to take the shot. They were just lined up in front of the tree and said, "Do it." And I went click, click, click. That was it, basically, with a few seconds between each shot. In not one of those shots were everyone smiling, looking at the camera. And quite a few of them, you could have lit a candle. Their faces were so red because of their time at the bar. So I had to fix them, and this is how you fix them. That's a red face. Now, this is just an example. We're going to go to the real thing in a minute, and then the real thing. And in channels, I've isolated that particular object so we can work on it on its own. And in layers, I'm just going to go Command-J and copy it to a new layer, because then it's easier to work with. And now I'm going to open up Hue and Saturation. Now, fairly obviously, I kind of cooked this one up. It's not a real-life situation. But with that one layer selected, if I drag the hue slider one way or the other, of course the other layers aren't affected, and I can just fix that. Great. But it's not always so easy to isolate exactly the colors that you want to work with. And this is a picture of two friends of mine. The guy had the misfortune of changing a deadline on me at the last minute, a deadline that I ended up making by 6 minutes, which is as close as I ever want to cut it. And I told him he would pay dearly for that and publish this in a book. And on the following page was the fix. He's not yet done it to me again. So I'm going to isolate their faces on a new layer. This again, I cooked this one up. And to do that, I'm going to make a loose selection of him. So there's lots of other colors within this selection. And then hold down the Shift key and start down in the gray area here, because the selection tool is active down there, even though there's nothing for it to select. And that is a way of making sure your selection goes right to the edge. You start off the edge of the image, and you finish off the edge of the image. And now I've got a selection of him and her. And I'm going to feather the edge of those selections. I'll use Refine Edge again, another use of it. You get a live preview of what the result's going to be. If I drag the feather slider to the right, you can see the edge of that gets soft. That means that the result of what I do is going to be less visible. It's going to merge in better with its background. So if I click OK now, and then copy that to a new layer, I've now got their faces on their own layer. And if I use Hue and Saturation and drag the hue slider to the right a little bit, it fixes their faces, but her hair goes green, which is not quite what I had in mind. So what I have to do instead is tell this window that I only want to work on a particular range of colors, and that range is reds. The master list allows me to choose reds, which brackets off a chunk of the rainbow down at the bottom. You can move these handles and reallocate colors inside that area, outside that area. Now if I pull the hue slider, only their faces change. And they're a bit anemic there. There we go. And I've got a picture I can use. So I've gone from that to that without changing anything else. So this is pretty much a lifesaver when you're doing portrait shots, and that's basically how I fix the red faces in this picture. Now let's do a real bad one. Hope I'm going to remember this. I can't, I don't write this stuff down for this. I'm just going to, okay, I think I know what to do. That's a pretty dismal picture, isn't it? I don't know who this is, but someone who came on a Photoshop class brought this one in and said, I took this one last night, can you fix it? Well, I love a challenge. First of all, and always make a new layer. That's the contingency plan, so I'm not working on the original. And to me, there are many problems with this image, aside from the fact that he's got some magenta tinges here and there. One is the overall color values, the overall tone balance is awful, so I'm going to do it with adjustment layers here. That's the adjustment curve. And adjustment layers are like smart objects. This will become a sub-layer. It's something I can switch on and off. It doesn't disturb the original tone of the image until I decide I want it to. If I click in the middle of that and pull one way or the other, that's just like moving the middle slider in levels. If I now turn it into a little bit of an S-bend, then I can actually work on the relative brightness of the image. We'll put it up a bit. Try and do this just a little bit at a time, rather than fixing the whole thing at once. I'm going to go with that for now. Now if I turn that off, you can see the original image underneath it. So I'd say that's an improvement. I'm going to merge that down now, Command E. Now I'm going to fix the red eye. So the red eye tool is really cool. You just get it and you click on the problem. And it fixes it, and that's all you have to do. And now I'm going to try and work on the areas that are a bit red. So that means, first of all, making a selection. And I'm going to do this, all this area in his forehead, first of all. And then this area in his cheek, and his nose, and that cheek. And then feather it, because that's always a good idea. Well, what happened there? Okay, I think I'm going to maybe make a... No, I won't make a new channel of that. Okay, we'll just go refine edge, feather. Do a view on white. That's better. Okay, now Command J. So I've got that area on a new layer. Now I'll do a little bit with this slider. I can't do too much, but I can do a bit. And I desaturate a little bit as well. That fixed his forehead. These are now paler and they're shades of red rather than magenta. So I'll OK that. Now I'm going to take another sub-layer of this, so I'm going to load that as a selection. And then with the freehand lasso tool and the Alt key, I'm going to cut that chunk back out of it. I don't need that. And there's areas here that I don't really need anymore either. I'm going to try that bit again. So hopefully there's still a bit of a feather on it. Let's add a little bit more just to be safe. Well, the new bits there aren't, so let's do a little bit more there. Okay. And Command J again. And Command U. And choose reds. And desaturate a little bit. Now I'm pretty much there. Not quite. I could spend a lot more time on that. But if I just click on history, I don't know if you've ever noticed, but when you're working on an image, it's very easy to forget how far you've come. And the history window enables you to check, especially if you click on this icon at the bottom, that gives you a snapshot. So that snapshot is where we are now, but that's where we started. So you can just quickly see how far you've brought the image. Well, he's looking a little jaundiced, but maybe I'd have to fix the others. But anyway, you get the idea, I think. You can fix images like this, even like this. It's never going to win any awards, but he might not be quite so embarrassed about it. Fixing Wrinkles. Love this one. Bit of a problem. Okay, fix the wrinkles. Ooh. Okay, now this is another one of those inventing the bagel methods. It's very unlikely. You can't really sort of imagine how somebody came up with it. So, in layers, first thing I'm going to do is make a new layer. And then I'm going to go to town on this one using the healing brush tool. I'm not really trying to do anything other than create what I need for the next stage. Healing brush tool, unlike the clone stamp tool, if I choose the clone stamp tool, this box, align sample, is checked. And that means when you define a source point and start working, and that follows you around, if you then start working somewhere else, the source point comes in at the same relative position as your original definition. The healing brush tool doesn't do that. If I choose that one, the align sample is not checked, and that means your source point stays, and you work here, and then you go work here, and you work here, and your source point stays put the whole time. Because it's not using the same kind of information or trying to fix the same thing. So we'll alt-click there, and that's my source point, and to begin with I'm just going to tap a little bit around, and you can see that every time I let go, it returns to the same position in the middle of his cheek there. And pretty soon you'll find that you've turned the victim into a burn victim. It's really bad. It looks like he's had, the worst possible NHS skin grafts for a long, long time. And of course, as his cheek area gets smoother, you can sort of extend the healing brush. Now I'm being very careful not to touch his hat, because if I do, because of the way the healing brush tool works, it will take the color for the fix around that blob that I just painted. If that blob goes over into his hat, well, I'll show you. His hat will now be part of the color that fixes that area problem. So you don't go over the edge, okay? And of course, Command Z is your friend, because it undoes the thing that you just did. The way to tell if you've been using the computer too much is if you accidentally hurt yourself and you immediately mentally go Command Z. If that happens to you, you need a break. I've done it. Okay. Well, there we go. The wrinkles are smooth. Okay, so we're not going to do it quite like that. So now I'm going to add a layer mask to this layer. And I'm going to put one of the channels for this changed image into it. If I go to channels and have a look at them, there's the blue channel. That's fairly murky, isn't it? And here's the green channel. It's a bit lighter. And here's the red channel. And the red channel is the lightest of the three. And that's a little strange because if you look at his image, there is more red present than anything else. So if there's more red present in the image, wouldn't you think that the red channel would be darker? Because there's more of it. It's red light. That's the thing. The lighter the channel, the more of it there is. So the reason his face is red is actually because the red channel is lighter than the green or the blue. The combination of green and red means we've got not just reds, but we've got oranges as well, because green and red combine to create yellow in RGB. It's a very weird system. So I'm going to pick the red channel and put that into the mask. And the way I'm going to do it is by, first of all, I've got to select it. Command A, there's the whole thing. Command C copies it into memory. Now I've got to make this mask the visible image. I could do that, didn't work. I could do that, didn't work. If I turned that off, that works. That's one way to get the mask as a visible image. It's got to be the only selected channel. Here's another way. Alt-click on it in the Layers window. And as I spend more of my time working in layers, I tend to use that method. So Alt-clicking on a mask loads it as the visible image. And now if I paste, I've got that channel showing up right there. And Command D gets rid of the selection. Now I'll click on the image again. Now watch carefully, I'm going to turn this layer on and off. That's what we just did. It's a bit of a surprise, isn't it? An amazing result. When you look at the process, and how did anyone figure that out, I don't know. What's happening here, if I alt-click on that again, the way a mask works is where it's dark, I can see through to the other layers. Where it's white, I can't see through this layer. So white reveals the layer that it shares, the image that it shares the layer with. White reveals the image. Black reveals the other images, but hides this one. A shade of grey here partially obscures this one and partially allows me to see through to this one underneath. And that's the result. Because I smoothed out his face and then put just the red channel of that into the mask, that is smoothing out this image, but in a much, much better way than that adjusted image that I did with a healing brush tool. Now, I do this quite often in the Photoshop classes. This is quite often in those. And one person decided to carry on working with it and merged these two layers together and started the process again. And I thought you'd like to see the result. I call it taking it too far. There it is. It gets a little strange, doesn't it? Now, that's one hit. That's what I just did. Here's two. Here's three. There's a point beyond which it just doesn't work. So you do have to be a little bit careful with this one. But that's a very, very cool method. I've never seen this method in a book. This is one of those whispered lineage methods. So now you know it. Hope you wrote it down. If not, we've got the tape. So that's that one. Last but not least, hopefully I'll still have time to do that other one, is animated Gifs. Got that one of Tarek here. And the one of Mark, yeah, I showed it to him earlier. Yeah. So Tarek, some of you may have been in one of Tarek's classes here today, one of our other trainers, and somebody, our office manager, lifted 3 stills out of the video he put together for this and gave them to me. That's a big mistake. And I turned them into a poster. So this is actually an animated GIF. I'll show you this one. Oh, I don't know if I probably can. Let's see. Oh, no. Oh, that's the PSD, I think. Let's see if I can turn on the animation window and get that to play. Yeah, I probably can. So that's a fairly silly example, but they are kind of fun. My family dread birthdays and Christmas. My brother offered me money to never do him another birthday card. Didn't work. So I'll show you how to do these. This is a PSD file. And in this PSD file I've got a bunch of layers. That background is just a black layer. And then I've created various things on top of it. On this layer we've got the number 5. 4, 3, 2, 1. Boom. And that'll be a countdown with each frame taking 1 second to play. You can't put a PSD file on a website. You can put a GIF on a website. This website supports GIF, JPEGs, PNGs, PNGs, but the only one that supports animation is a GIF. And in Photoshop you can create a layer configuration and say, okay, that's frame 1. And another layer configuration, that's frame 2. And when you've got all your frames, you apply the timing, and you save the whole thing out as a GIF file. So here I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 frames that I want on top of this one. So I'll click on that 6 times. And at the moment they're all going to run for 1 second, which is perfect. If I didn't want them to, I could adjust the timing for any one of them, or I could click on one, shift click on another, and I can adjust the timing for the whole lot together. And I don't actually want to bother doing that. 1 second's what I want. So in this first layer, first frame, I only want the background. The background has propagated into all the frames because it's turned on here, and I've got propagate frame 1 selected at the top of the layers window. So for frame 2, which I just selected, I'll turn on that. Frame 3, that. Frame 4, that. 5, we want 2. 6, we want 1. And 7, I want both of those. And then you can choose whether you want it to play once, 3 times, other, or forever. We'll just have this play once. And I'll select the first frame, and there's the play button. Pretty straightforward. So then you've got to turn it into something that you can export for a website. And that means using optimization. And if you go to File, Save for Web and Devices, you can choose an optimization method. I usually choose 2UP. I should put one of these. There we go. We'll have actually we have that image. There's 2UP. It's quite a big image. You can use Command- to zoom out or Command+ to zoom in, but usually the size that it appears when you go into this window is the size it's going to be on a website. So that's good because you can look at it as you make adjustments and decide if you've eroded the color quality too much, or you get a good idea. So that's the original. That's not what I'm going to change. This is the one I'm going to change. Up here I've got presets for GIF, JPEG, Ping 24. The Ping 8's really not worth bothering with, nor is Windows Bitmap. That's terrible. Ping 24 allows total transparency of anything. GIF allows 1 degree of transparency. JPEG doesn't allow any. So Ping's kind of the best of both worlds, and it's the biggest file as a result. JPEG is great for continuous tone like a photograph where you need a lot of colors. GIF is great for something like a logo or a map where you've got a restricted number of colors, and if you want to do an animation. And they only support 256 shades or less. So if I choose 128, can you see any difference between these two images? I can't. So that's still working. Let's try 64. Still looks pretty good. The size of the GIF is going down and down and down each time I do this. Let's try 32. 58K. Let's keep going. 16. Now I'm starting to see banding occurring here. So if I'm not too bothered about that, if I thought, okay, that's actually quite good, or I could say, no, I don't want that, I've got to go back up to 32, that softens it a bit. If you want, you could say, well, heck, these two shades of orange are almost identical. I'm sure I don't need that one, and bin it. And now I've got a 31 color GIF, so you can whittle them down one at a time. When you're happy with what you're going to get, you choose Save, and you can choose either to save the images only, or the HTML only, or the HTML and the images. In the case of a GIF, you only need the images. You don't need HTML to position a GIF on a website. If you're doing a thing called a sliced image, where you're cutting up a big image so it loads a little bit at a time on a website, this process creates a table to put each chunk in, and then, yeah, you need that HTML, or you don't have a table to fit them together in. But in this case, you only need images. So if I go Save, I just got my result on the website, on the desktop. So I'm not going to bother to save this. Let's go have a quick look at the desktop, see if I can find it. There it is. Now if I open up, I guess I've already got, I'll open it. I'll go File, New Window, Open, File, go to the desktop, there it is. That's an animated GIF. I could also put the Tarek file on here as well. Or I could put this other one that I created earlier. Mark Young, one of the guys who owns Academy Class, here he is dancing. And that's a combination of animated GIF and Puppet Walk, which is one of the content-aware tools. He quite liked that. So you can do quite a lot of fun stuff with animated GIFs. May just have enough time to do that cutout, if you'd like to see it. The idea with this is to take Charlie out of that image and put him into Sherburn High Street. So it's easier to select Charlie than it is to select the background. Quick selection tool is pretty good, but it also is a bit sloppy, so I'm going to go Alt, click and drag up here. And again there. That's probably okay. And I'll go Refine Edge. And I'll put this up to about 60. It's a good median point. And then use Smart Radius. Now what Smart Radius does is it closes the radius down. 60, that's 60, but Smart Radius makes it close down around the areas that are most important. And then again I can use this Refine Radius tool, bit of a bigger brush now, get all those wispy bits of hair. It's got this incredible tail. People stop us on the street and say, wow, that dog's tail is amazing. Oops. That's pretty good already. Okay, I'm going to just go New Layer with Layer Mask. There he is. And now I'm going to get the Move tool and drag him and his mask into Sherburn. And look at that tail. Now there's a little, oh, you know, I forgot one thing. I should have done desaturate colors. That's too bad. I've got to go back a second. Hold on. Quick selection. Okay, I got the selection. Refine edge. It's good practice. You probably haven't seen this before. Decontaminate colors. Did you see that sort of glow around him in the image a minute ago? Well, you won't see it this time. Look at that. Now there is a little bit of a sort of a nimbus. If I zoom in on him, you can see there's quite a few problems. But these are nothing to do with the selection I just did, really. Partly it's because he came from a sunny day, so there's highlights of blue. So let's fix those. There's blues. Now okay, there's plenty of blue. Desaturate, they go gray. Cyans. Yeah, plenty of cyan. Now they've gone gray. Yellows and greens. He's got yellow and green on his chest there. Now he doesn't. Now I've got a black and white dog with a pink tongue. Command L, levels, and I can just darken him up a little bit, give him a little bit more density. And then this slightly light area around him, if I get the the burn tool, which makes things darker, and I'm going for mid-tones, make the brush a bit lighter than that, and just go over those edges, and now I'm going to switch to highlights, and that edge just disappears all the way around. Until I've got a picture of a dog running down Sherburn High Street, just about to smack into me. Photoshop's great.